Here we go. Very excited today. This has been in the pipeline for a while. I'm your host on this podcast, Gavin Savage, and I'm very excited to welcome our first guest, Nick Poulos, founder and managing partner at Euclid Ventures. Nick, you're known for being a serial vertical software investor, getting in early with founders and helping shape the journeys from the ground up. So you're staying true to that by kicking off chapter 1 with us here on the Vertical SaaS podcast as our debut guest. So when we've had 1 million subscribers and we've got hundreds of episodes, you can proudly say that you were the first one on the show. So thank you for coming on, mate.
Excited to be here, Gav. It's an honor to be the first guest.
Well, you know, it's great. It's the first episode. It's nice to be able to do it with someone I know. We're just staying off camera. It's the first time I've actually seen Nick on a video because we've been riffing for the past year and a half on the phone, you know, and we first got introduced through one of your investments at Frontier Risk. So it's nice to be able to actually get this space with you and be able to kind of pick your brain on all things Vertical SaaS. So yeah, excited to get going.
Likewise, man. Happy to be here. Shall we kick off? I'll turn it over to you, wherever you want to start.
Best place to start. Soup to nuts, because I don't even know this actually, and I'd love to find out your journey. So from what was it about vertical software? Was it something you fell into, being an investor, founding your own firm? Like, yeah, soup to nuts at high level, of course, you know, like it'd be great to about your journey and the journey to founding Euclid's and yeah, the mission and vision at Euclid as well.
Of course. So I started out my career in New York. I was there for 15 years before I moved back to San Francisco. And my first job, as I think with many of us out of school in those days, was investment banking. Learned a lot from it, but knew maybe that wasn't going to be the ultimate path. And really where I started there was software M&A. I've kind of always been a coder, tinker, gamer, what have you. So I figured if I was going to, learn that skill set, I might as well do it in an area I already loved, which was tech. And I think that just, got me deeper in love with the space, but knew I wanted to go out and get some experience working at companies. And, maybe not all of our listeners here might remember, but back in the day, AOL was still a company. Was a big company, and it just spun out of Time Warner. If you remember, they merged at $100 billion valuation that had come down, to maybe 10% of that. But it was an interesting time. They had headquartered in New York. A big mandate was, getting closer with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, being thought of as an internet company again. And as part of that, I was able to join up with what would become AOL Ventures. We became one of the more active early stage investors in New York, and it's hard to believe now, but the New York ecosystem back then was very nascent in terms of venture and startups. A lot of ad tech, some fintech, not much else. And long story short, in 2013, ended up launching Bowery Capital with Mike Brown, the managing partner there, who's still running it. And, our mandate was B2B software at the seed stage. And this was, again, early in the days of seed stage venture in general. Back then, being just enterprise focused, just B2B focused, that was, it was a differentiator in itself. And I think we built a really great brand there. And I was lucky enough to be there, working with Mike for nearly a decade. And, the story in my mind there was I started out as a B2B software generalist, but early on came across vertical software. I was first investor in a business called Transfix, which is in the supply chain space. And I think that deal was pretty emblematic of the sort of businesses I would, go on to focus on full time, in that, the freight market, it's legacy in a lot of ways, right? It's got a lot of manual processes, but it's a huge market. And, and it just made sense that matching loads could be done through technology. And, it was seen as backwater then. And now, as we know, supply chain tech, freight tech, has become super popular. So, really, I just lean more and more over the years into that model of, finding these markets in which, they're big markets, they had specialist needs, but no one was building software for them. And, long story short, ended up investing in, a couple dozen of these type of businesses. I went over for a little bit as a partner at a larger fund called Fifth Wall that is vertically focused. And then really in, 21 or so, Omar and I, Omar's my current partner at Euclid, longtime friends, many time co-investors. We saw the writing on the wall. The opportunity for vertical software was huge. It had become half of all B2B software exits, but still there was just no dedicated capital and expertise at that early stage. And so that's long story long. That's how we came to building Euclid.
Love it. I love it. And just to that last point there, when you talk about the demand that's grown and the half of exits at B2B are now vertical, like, why do you think that is? Is it the obvious COVID? Or, I mean, I'm sure there's more, but I think it'd be good to get a bit of insight from you.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's just kind of, uptick so much?
Yeah, in my mind, the answer, there's many answers, but the core answer in my mind is very simple, which is that, over the last 20, 30 years, the cost to build a software startup and the infrastructure that needs to go into that, the CapEx investment has all come down drastically. At the same time, the market for software has grown enormously as it has, to use the common moniker now, eaten the world, right? It has captured areas of spend that used to be dedicated to people, to services. And so when you have those two things, it just makes sense that winning software in each subsequent generation is going to be more specialized, right? So, before, building software specifically for, let's take that freight example. You might have said like, well, the entire market is IBM, Oracle, and there's only so much spend. Well, that spend has grown and it's cheaper to build a company. And so as a result, you see, businesses like Toast, ServiceTitan, AppFolio, what have you, that, these are very clearly $10 billion plus markets. So I think it's just that inexorable specialization of software that leads to verticalized software being, bigger and bigger opportunity over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, I mean, like, probably up until about a couple of years ago, people probably didn't even know who Toast were, or probably didn't even know who, like, Procore were, and and now these are leaders in the way. And I always kind of think right now the more personalised and the more intelligent software gets, and as you say, the price of software to be built coming down. These guys that have been 20 years in restaurant or construction, they're just thinking, well, shit, I don't need millions now to go and build the software in the company. I can build it lean, and I can do it quicker now. So I don't know. There's many probably factors to it, but interesting one from you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point too, which is that I don't want to discredit the founders who are building these things. Taking that same Transfix example, Drew and Jonathan, these were next gen folks who they understood freight, but they also understood technology, maybe in a way that the prior generation didn't. So, yeah.
And look, just as a really basic concept before we move on to other topics, the vertical SaaS in its own thing. We love a buzzword in the world of tech. Previously that's how we met, through the InsurTech, past few years specialising in there. And InsurTech is one of those words, fintech. It's just they're all buzzwords. But so vertical SaaS, what is it, and what makes it distinct from horizontal? Because before you answer, I was listening to a podcast last night. It was the co-founder of Notion, and I would have thought night and day that's a vertical software play. But when he gets asked the question, he's like, no, we're horizontal SaaS, and we feed into consumer and business. But they redefined the way, like, we used to use maybe Kanban before Notion, maybe, I don't know. But so I always think it's interesting. I'd love to hear from you how you separate the two.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think really the term comes from, kind of a business school paradigm. So I don't know if you've ever seen that 2x2 chart where, on the x-axis you have your various industries, right? Construction, healthcare, what have you.
Yeah.
And on the y-axis you got your functions, right? So sales, infrastructure, marketing. And, so really it's just talking about choosing one industry and building out one or many solutions just within an industry, as opposed to a Notion or Salesforce, which is going to sell sales and marketing primarily software across every industry, right? So I think about it as B2B software focused on transforming and serving the ecosystem of one particular industry, or one particular sector, if you want to think about it that way. So, as an example, we've invested in software for construction, for healthcare, for supply chain, right? And in a lot of ways too, you can think about them as building for sub industries, right? It doesn't have to be that general, but I would say there is overlap with with some areas where, hey, highly specialized software with a very defined audience, that can feel like vertical software, but generally we think about it from an industry lens. And to answer maybe your question on what makes vertical software different, well, I think really it comes down to an ecosystem play, right? You have, let's just take the construction ecosystem, right? You have your GCs, your subcontractors, you have your architects, your engineers, all of these different roles that filter into, really one core function. You can build software for one of those stakeholders, and maybe over time you're building software services, fintech for more. And the more adoption you get, the more mind share you get. So it's kind of, it's carving out a very particular audience in which, that kind of mind share can just snowball. And that's ultimately one of the big benefits of the model as well, right? You look at vertical software companies, they have higher penetration rates at scale. They have, higher sustainability of growth over time. So, I won't go into all the details, but just a little on how I think about the space.
Awesome. And comparative to probably last year to this year, specific verticals, trends, like where are you seeing, because you and I, again, we kind of have calls and we're probably looking at two different sides of the verticals. You are, I was saying one half and I'm maybe focused on another half, and I think between us we probably cover them all. But where are you seeing the kind of the fastest growth or disruption now, and what are you most excited about?
Yeah. So, look, as you know, a lot of activity right now is defined by figuring out what LLMs can do that prior generations of software couldn't. And that's not to say, traditional software, if you want to call it that, doesn't have a primary place. It's just more that, when you have a technology unlock like this, VCs, founders, we all want to rush to kind of be the first to capture that. And so in a lot of ways, I think the trends you've been seeing over the last year have been defined by AI, the current wave in AI. So to answer your question, we're seeing a lot in healthcare, right? A ton of innovation in healthcare, because if you think about it, that is in an industry in which there are endless number of services, lots of parsing of documents, lots of complex data where there's maybe kludgy interconnectivity, and these are all things that natural language models are great at speeding up or solving. So you're seeing a lot of movement there. I'm sure, as you've been seeing, Gav, insurance is definitely another area of interest. I think it's mainly been on the carrier claims side, but again, think about it. That is just purely processing documents, and whenever you have something where it's like, hey, there's a 200-page PDF, go read it in order to do your job. Well, that's a potentially pretty nice wedge. And so those are kind of two areas we've been seeing a lot. I'd say in general, though, really think about any services business today. There is probably opportunity, and that's one theme we're quite excited about.
And what do you think coming into it, say you don't come from maybe industry and someone's looking to build a really impactful piece of vertical software, like common mistakes that you've maybe seen founders enter into a market? Because again, going back to InsurTech, we've seen that people coming over from fintech and they're like, well, InsurTech's booming, so we'll just do what we did in banking and we'll bring it over to insurance, cowboys a little bit, and it didn't work. A lot of people failed. Is there any kind of common mistakes that you've seen, lessons from maybe failed startups, or what you've seen typically work really well for a vertical SaaS focused startup?
Yeah, I'd say from the perspective of a founder, you really need to understand not just the problem you're solving, but how it's solved today. And I know that sounds, really table stakes, right? But the truth of the matter is, once you get into the nitty gritty of how, uh, you know, uh, let's say a subcontractor has his or her day to day, right? Like what sites they're on, what kind of compliance they need to meet, who they talk to, and you could extend the same thing to the life of you know, um, a nurse practitioner or an insurance broker. There's a lot of detail there. There's a lot of built-in history, preconceived notions about what software can and can't do. And all of these details are just really hard to understand if you don't have that deep domain expertise. And so that at Euclid, that is one thing that we look for in every founding team. And I want to be clear, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to come from industry to be a successful CEO building software into that industry. But I think what it does mean is you need to recognize and know what you don't know and bring on team around you early on to fill that gap. Because I think increasingly what doesn't work very well is, you have a team and they may be a great high horsepower team, but they don't understand the industry. And so you've got to, got to get those learnings and those kind of lumps on the head as you go. So that's what I'd say is really make sure you've solved for domain expertise and know your problem like your customers do.
Yeah, and I guess on the flip side, from a red flag perspective, if they don't have that, then that's a big red flag for you when you're evaluating at the early stages.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would position it is one of the core five things that I look for in founders is honesty, and big part of honesty is self-awareness, right? And being intellectually honest to say, hey, I really know this, but truthfully, I can't stand behind saying I know this, and that's fine because that is the life of a founder, But you got to know a little bit what you don't know and fill those gaps. So I would say, yeah, just try to be really honest of how deeply do I know this problem? Can I talk this problem as fluently as my customer can? And if you can't, that's okay, but get the right people around you.
Do you think? I think everyone probably Nick's. For anyone who doesn't know, Nick's in San Francisco, but he's actually in wine country at the moment. But I'm sure everyone in San Francisco is red founder mode.
Yeah.
So I think it's got everyone thinking how you set up a company. And I just think for me the red flags that I always see is probably a founder just hiring the leaders within the hiring a VP of everything in the first 2 months, and then just kind of, I don't know, going and doing podcasts and investor meetings, and like I think for me that's probably one of the most concerning things that you hear, and it never works. Like the VP of sales gets chucked out in 6 months because he's not built up enough traction because he can't sell the product because he's not the founder.
Yep.
So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, no,
Whether
I think it
you want to
is.
manager mode or whether you just want that CEO to just hustle like fuck for like 12 months, and if he's not doing that, maybe
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
Yeah, look, velocity is important. And velocity could mean building product. Velocity could mean customer discovery. It doesn't even necessarily need to mean that you're succeeding, but it is that's another one of the handful of things that we look for is velocity just of thought and movement, because that is the lifeblood of early stage startups. You got to move fast. If you're going to fail, you got to fail fast, and just just get moving. So
Yeah.
I agree with that aspect of it for sure.
And do you think, because again, we were talking a few weeks ago about the talent aspect of it, and just to my kind of one of my points there about hiring someone in that's maybe not right at this certain stage, like when you're assembling a team that supports vertical software within whatever, a highly regulated complex industry, like how do you think, or what do you think you've seen work well and not work well when it comes to assembling teams? It's maybe quite a
Yep.
broad question, but yeah, I'm sure you've seen a
No.
lot.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think in terms of thinking, look, how should I consider talent differently as a vertical software founder versus a horizontal founder? I
Mm.
think one thing that looms large in my mind is sometimes you need people from industry, and there. I think look, there's a kind of gut instinct amongst both founders and VCs of we're just going to go out and get the most high horsepower people we possibly can. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, to be honest. But the truth of the matter is, you know, as an example, right? We in the past invested in a business, and our investors in a business that sells into call it the commercial equipment or heavy machinery space, right? And you're interfacing with the contractor who's got 20 guys and is wherever he is in rural Washington, and he's got deadline, right? You got to be able to talk the talk, and
Mm.
getting a really like the number one rep out of Salesforce. I mean, actually, Salesforce does verticalize their sales, so maybe that's not a good example. But getting the best AE out of wherever may not work. You may need people to talk the talk. So maybe to get tactical, one thing that we find can often work, especially if you're that founder who doesn't come from industry, right? And maybe you don't have that co-founder who's that perfect industry person. Sometimes we see folks bring on what you almost might call kind of an industry evangelist type. Now, this
Mm.
person needs a defined role, and that role is usually sales, sometimes BD, but someone who comes with a little bit of a Rolodex, who can hit the pavement, who knows the right conferences, and can talk the talk. We've seen that role thrive in a couple of our startups. So just something to consider.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's something that I'm asked for, domain experience and software product startup. I'm always a big believer. I don't know. It really depends on the culture of the company and how they're setting up from a kind of passion, creativity at the foundation. And I think
Yep.
domain experience is great, but I do think the emphasis on it sometimes can maybe be a bit crippling to some of the
Mm.
startups because they
Yep.
they want it so bad and they think it's the only answer. Then when they go to market, there's maybe only 50 people that can do it,
Yeah.
and they're reluctant to take someone that comes from, I don't know, just broader SaaS. But like
Yeah.
why? Because they can bring outside perspective in. And that's the whole point in diverse teams. It's not to just build mirror images of everyone in the company. So, but I
Yeah.
think probably more on. I think probably more in sales. I think
Hmm.
sales requires it big time. I think anything across tech doesn't.
Oh, that I agree with. I think what I said earlier is primarily related to the go-to-market function.
Yeah.
Um, I think what we typically see is, you know, product eng, not as much. It's really more so, you have certain industries where the customers, they just talk a certain way, and there are just certain norms and standards. And, I think contractors are a great example, right? These are busy guys, and they don't want to get on the phone with somebody who they have to explain their job to them, right? I don't blame them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either. And so, but I will say, not to like just equivocate here and agree, but you make a good point in that like the best teams find a way to have both. It also
Mm.
doesn't work like industry experts only. You need to know how to build a high growth, business. And so I guess I agree across the board.
Yeah, and some, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not, that was quite a blanket statement from me. Like, I'm not suggesting that every CTO or CPO or whatever technology leader shouldn't have it. Like, buyers in these markets are unsophisticated, they're almost dinosaurs when it comes to technology. So when you have someone that does have the domain and the software, they can communicate probably better to them. So there is a danger
Hmm.
in just bringing someone too off the wall and too cutting edge in, and too broader SaaS. So I do think
Yeah.
it's the perfect balance. I think it's just having that probably a nice split, nice 50-50 split of the domain and a bit broader. But yeah, look, I'm conscious of our time here, Nick. But for any company across the spaces that we've discussed, I think you've already gave a very good breakdown as to what you look for. But Nick and Omar, Euclid, what do you look for, or what are you looking for now and over the next 12 months when you're investing in vertical SaaS companies?
Yeah, I think Omar and I have been in venture for about 15 years. We've had the pleasure of working at some amazing firms, and we've taken those learnings and really focused them in on vertical software specifically. So, as mentioned before, all we do is vertical software, and all we do is really first check investing, right? So often for us, this is leading or co-leading a pre-seed round, but just as often, it's what I might call a formation stage round, or almost an idea stage round. What we really love is meeting founders when they're just working through the idea. Maybe they're even still at their last company, and just being thought partners along the way. Getting to know how people think, and really being that first institutional capital. And so ultimately, that is when we would love to meet folks. I'd say in general, another element to know about us is we're very high concentration, right? So we do only about 5 investments a year. We're all in on every deal, and we're working with our founders on a usually multiple days a week sort of basis. So that's the kind of firm that we're building here. That's the kind of firm we have a lot of conviction drives the best returns, and we think, we hope that is also what provides the most value to founders. So to anyone listening, if you're building a vertical software business or just thinking about the transformation of an industry, I'd love to chat.
And that's what really stands out to you before seeking that funding, just that obsession, that deep understanding of the problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think that's really important. A deep understanding of the problem. I'd say, if we're talking about what really gets Euclid excited, it's a deep understanding of a problem. You've got the team around the table, at least the very core team, that checks all those boxes we were talking about. And then I'd say finally, what I'd really maybe counsel, founders to think about before raising capital is just do as much as you can to validate the pain point with the customer, right? And there are ways to do this without signing contracts. There are ways to do this in advance of even building product. I mean, I was talking to a founder yesterday who sold 3 deals without having built product, and he didn't do it. It wasn't. He didn't lie. He didn't obfuscate. He just said, "Hey, here's what we're building. Would you use this? We're happy to tailor it to you." So, I'm not advocating in a particular path, but just saying, the more that you can credibly validate the customer problem that you're solving, the more excited that we will certainly be. And I think the same is probably true of most investors.
Excellent. Well, look, I think that's a great place to leave it, Nick. I've really enjoyed having you on. I think, a lot of great takeaways for people operating in the vertical SaaS space. So again, appreciate your time, man.
Of course, it's been a pleasure, Gavin, and look forward to seeing many more of these.
Yeah, take care, man. Thank you.
Likewise.